In this video, I'm going to lay out a number of ways that I think that you can avoid the recent pension reforms from Jeremy Hunt.
These are very difficult decisions.
I also need to let you know that I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This is just me trying to make the options clearer to you because for some reason, even though a work-based pension is one of the most important assets in a person's life, the system fails to educate people on them properly. So, it's down to some dude on the internet with a wonky lip and a tendency to miss out T's in the middle of sentences to try and help. Let's start with option one, just do nothing.
What?
Probably not what you expected me to say, is it? But this is an option. These changes affect 5% of the default funds. So this is the fund that you put in through your work-based scheme if you don't select your own fund. It's better to be in the scheme than not, in my opinion, because you're getting money from your employer. If you and your employer do the bare minimum required of you, then nearly half of the pot will be money that you've not paid in yourself. Don't cut off your nose to spite your face and just turn away that free cash. I believe everyone should take full advantage of their work-based scheme, even if that's in the default funds. Right, now let's look at ways to actually avoid the changes. Option 2, get out of the default. So you have the ability to log onto your pension and choose an investment for yourself, taking yourself out of the default option away from the reforms and investing in a manner that suits your own risk profile. The amount of choice you get depends on the provider. These are the companies that have signed up to the compact so far, and more will follow, I'm sure, once they get a sniff of the fees. I've taken a look around at some of the options on some of these platforms where I could find them. M&G had me going around in circles. In some cases, the choices were very limited. Nest appears to only have 5 options. I mean, great work, Nest. And some of the other systems seem a bit clunky and not that easy to navigate. You can filter for your own preferences on most of these sites, but just pick up the phone and call them, tell them what you want and ask them for a list of funds that matches that. They work for you, remember, make them earn their fees. I hope you appreciate that I can't tell you what to buy, but I will tell you what I would want. A global fund, so something that buys businesses all over the world. You might just want America or something else, I mean, that's up to you. I've actually got a video coming up in a couple of days on why I buy a global index and not just the S&P 500. I mean, cancel all your plans and put that in your calendar, I bet you can't wait. I would want it to be 100% equity, so all stocks because of my age. I want it to be passive or a tracker fund, so no fund manager picks the investment. This reduces the cost normally and improves the returns. I would also want it to be a capitalization weighted index. That means the money is spread around businesses and countries based on their size. So 4% would go to the UK, as that's how big the UK is in terms of the global stock market. I think a good thing you can do is go to your pension provider with a comparison fund, and for me that would be the FTSE Global All Cap or VWRL, but that is just me. The key thing though is selecting something that suits your risk profile and your time horizon for investment. Below is a link to Standard Life's risk profile tool. You can complete it without putting in an email or anything, and it might be a good place to start. With the timeline thing I just mentioned, my preference for a global 100% equity, meaning everything's invested in the stock market, reflects my age. I would only really be buying that if I had at least 10 years before retirement. If I was closer than that, I might be considering bond allocation in the mix to reduce the volatility in my portfolio. Honestly, there's so many things you need to consider as you get older. Like, why does it hurt to get out of bed now? Why don't things work like they used to? And why is my hair falling out? Well, that's where today's video sponsor comes in, Manual. Like 50% of men watching this, my hair is falling out. I always had loads of thick, luscious hair, but recently it's just been sprinting to the back of my head. Not one to grow old gracefully. I've been using Manual services for a couple of months now. Anyone who watches the podcast will have seen T rinsing me when he looked at my bank statements.
What in the world is Manual?
Oh, don't do me like that.
What is a Manual?
It's hair loss treatment.
Hair loss treatment?
I mean, who needs enemies, eh? I've been so impressed with the results and the overall service, I actually approached Manual and asked them to sponsor the channel. They don't just do hair treatment either. They offer a range of products for all sorts of common male issues. No need for an appointment or to even leave your home, guys. It's all done online and the package comes to your door and it's really discreet. As part of my treatment, I have this spray, some tablets I take, and then a shampoo I use every time I wash my hair. And these things have been working. They're scientifically proven treatments for all stages of hair loss. I can already see the thickness of my hair improving, and it's only been 2 months. So I'm really happy to partner with Manual, and if you want to try them out, I've left a code in the description and also pinned one in the top comment for you. And if you use that, you'll get 50% off your first order. So with option 3, let's get a little bit more hands-on with the use of a SIP. A SIP, or self-invested personal pension, sounds really scary, and they do have some restrictions around them. You can put all sorts of stuff inside of them as well. But for me and you today, in most cases, it's just an option that you'll see when you register on a platform. And once you're inside, it'll just look like a normal investing or ISA account. Don't be scared of them. I'm going to use Vanguard a couple of times today as an example, simply because that's who mine is with. I'm not saying they're the best, far from it. Take a look around, there are plenty of options out there. And just to hammer a point home again, we want to be in the work-based scheme, we want the benefits from our employer, we want to take advantage of the match contribution, but we might also want a bigger choice of funds, more control over our money, or less fees. So how do we get both? The match contribution and the autonomy of a SIP? Well, one way to do that is through partial transfers. If I was still in a work-based scheme, once a year I would be doing a partial transfer from the work-based scheme into my own SIP, just to give me more control, but still to collect the benefits from the employer scheme. Let me just show you how easy this process is on Vanguard's platform, and most are the same. Just simply click here and follow the steps. There's a few questions to answer. The only information you'll actually need is the pension reference number from your work scheme, and then things like the amount you want to transfer and some details on the pension. You often need the address on your SIP and the one on your work-based scheme to match, so just keep everything up to date, and if your work schemes are on old addresses, get those updated. Okay, now before we start doing this, there are a few things that you need to consider, and we need to talk about this from the perspective of your current scheme, so the one with your current employer, and then any pensions you have floating around from other jobs in the past. Let's just start with the current scheme. You'll want to do a partial transfer here. That means you leave some money in the work-based scheme. You do this so it essentially stays open. If you transfer the lot, the scheme might shut down. Each year, I left about £500 in mine and moved the rest out. Some schemes might have minimum requirements. You might need to leave £1,000 in there, say, which will dictate how often you can then transfer out. Just call and check, and while you're at it, check if they're happy with partial transfers at all. Some schemes take the annoying stance of either everything's with us or just go away. This is unlikely with the work-based auto-enrolment schemes, as they get a lot of business by being part of the selection of companies that can be in these schemes, so they should allow partial transfers. But check with both who you are with and where you are sending the funds that they're happy with the partial transfers before you try and do one. And also consider the benefits of your current scheme. The reforms we're talking about at the minute apply to auto-enrolment DC schemes, so defined contribution. I saw people in the comments in the last videos asking if these changes apply to NHS schemes. Those are defined benefit pensions. They're like gold dust. Don't be messing around with those as a rule of thumb. I'm talking DC schemes, typical when you work in the private sector. But this does bring us to the second section nicely and the considerations around those. So these are considerations around previous pots or pensions that you hold with previous employers. I always get asked the question if I should consolidate all my previous pensions into one. So get all of my previous pensions from all my previous employments and just move them into a SIP, say. You'll see on my Vanguard here that I did this recently myself. Now the answer is it depends, because pensions can have benefits in the T's and C's that are not just the fees and the fund choices that you wouldn't want to lose. Now, typically, the older the pension, the more likely it is to have unique features that are valuable, as modern pensions got rid of a lot of the nice features. Now, that doesn't mean that they aren't there, but you should really be checking. I just make sure that, especially on schemes that are like, a decade old or more, that you're checking that these benefits don't exist within the scheme. Some things to consider are, is it a defined benefit or defined contribution, as we just mentioned? Are there any guarantees around annuity rates or tax-free lump sums coming out? And is there any penalties if you leave? Some of the schemes that you get with financial advisors like St James's Place have pretty aggressive exit fees within the first few years, so make sure that you're looking for those. There are loads of other things that you could consider as well. It's just worth calling up your pension provider and asking if there are any features, fees, or associated benefits with the pension that you will lose if you transfer out. If in doubt, go speak to a financial advisor. If I was in a work-based scheme right now, I would be maximising the contribution I get from my employers. So as much as they're willing to match, I would be paying that in to get the full benefit from them. And then once a year, I would do a partial transfer into my own SIP, taking those funds out, and then investing them in a low-cost global index, giving me full control over the funds. Many of you won't be keen on that level of control, so you can just log on and then select your own funds if you wish. Or you can just leave it. The key thing is, make that decision for yourself. And don't let politicians who operate outside the law of the land make those decisions for you, as there appears to be zero repercussions if they do mess it up, as we found out in this video where we got a better answer out of Toby Carvery on all of this than we did on the UK regulators. Or if you want a more in-depth chat about pensions from an actual financial advisor, this video here is an episode of my podcast with Lisa Conway-Hughes. Lisa is excellent and really knows her stuff, loads of value in that episode. And if none of that's your thing, well then I guess I'll see you for our S&P versus Global Index Fund date next week. I look forward to it.